So, hello everyone. We finished talking about the general features of qualitative research, and uh, we discussed the differences between quantitative and qualitative research. We talked about the research paradigms, the component of research paradigms, and the different types of research paradigms. And we also discussed the five main approaches or traditions in qualitative research, which were case study research, ethnography, phenomenology, grounded theory, and narrative research. We also covered the ethical considerations or ethical aspects of qualitative research. In this lecture, we will talk about the qualitative data collection methods. What are the methods or tools or techniques that we can use to collect data in qualitative research? And as you will see, there are many types of qualitative data collection methods. Some of them you may already familiar with, for example, such as interviews, which is one-to-one interview, or let's say what they call it as individual interviews, or and also focus group interviews. And we will talk about these types in our lecture today. So the intended learning outcomes from this lecture. After this lecture, you will be able to identify different types of data collection approaches that are utilized in qualitative research. You will be also able to describe the types of qualitative research interviews. There are several types of qualitative research interviews. You will be able to distinguish or differentiate between interviews and focus groups, which are the main types of data collection methods that's frequently used in qualitative research: interviews and focus groups, and what are the differences between them. You will be able also to identify different types of observation in qualitative research, as we mentioned, and when we talked about the different approaches or traditions in qualitative research. For example, let's say ethnography. We mentioned that observation is one of the main and key, and can be considered as a hallmark for ethnographic research, is to do observation for the participants in their particular culture. So we need here in this lecture also, we will be able to identify various types of observation in qualitative research, and identify also challenges facing researchers using participant observation approach. As we mentioned, there are different types of observation in qualitative research. These can be called as participant observation and non-participant observation. There are some challenges that may face the researcher utilizing participant observation approach, and we will be able to identify those challenges throughout this lecture. So in this slide you can see the lecture outline. What are the topics that we will cover in this lecture? Firstly, we will start with talking about interviews. We will talk about types of interviews, challenges of interviews, and quality of interviews. Okay. Then we will talk about the second type of data collection methods and qualitative research, which are focus groups. We will see the definition of focus group and the advantages of focus groups maybe over individual interviews. Thirdly, we'll talk about observation. What is the definition of observation? Why to use observation to collect data in qualitative research? Also, Different types of observations, styles of observations, how does one conduct an observation, and challenges of observation, particularly participant observation. So these are the main data collection methods that are frequently used by qualitative researchers, which are interviews, focus groups, and observation. And we will talk about the characteristics for each of these data collection methods in this lecture. So we will start with the interview. So interview is one data collection method or technique in qualitative research, and as we mentioned, it could be an individual interview, as you can see in the slide here. It could be one-to-one, where the researcher interviewed the participants or the respondents or the informants. Let's say sometimes they call the participant as informant or respondent. So as you can see, the participants or the researcher schedule an interview with the potential participants of a particular research study, and in this case the researcher may have like interview guide or interview, let's say, schedule, and this schedule includes several questions related to the topic under investigation, and the researcher starts to collect data by asking the participants the questions in this schedule, and the researcher can use can take some notes while doing the interviews, and can record them, and after this the researcher can transcribe make transcription for these interviews, and start analyzing them using let's say thematic analysis, which is the most common type of analysis in qualitative research, and we will talk about it in the next lectures. This is the main idea, and this is what all interviews about, and we will talk about it in details in the next slides. So again, what do we mean by interview? Interview method is the art of questioning and interpreting the answer. So generally, interview, and in general, it's an art where the researcher asks questions for the participants and interpret those answers or the answers of the participants, and analyzing them and extract the themes from them, and be able, in this way, the researcher will be able to answer the research questions using the data that's collected from participants in interviews. What are the advantages of interview? Firstly, use of open-ended questions gives participants the opportunity to respond in their own words rather than forcing them to choose from fixed responses. So it's in contrast to survey or a questionnaire, where the participants will be asked to choose their responses from some options that are, or from fixed responses. Here in interviews we have an open-ended questions. For example, why do you think this phenomenon happened? What are the factors, for example, that influence the occurrence of this phenomenon? What are the barriers for example, achieving a particular event in the healthcare system, let's say. So the questions that frequently asked in qualitative interviews are most commonly basically open-ended interviews. open-ended questions, and you can also assess the demographics, let's say, for the participants in your qualitative interviews by adding a section at the beginning of the interview schedule or interview guide, asking about some demographics information regarding the participants, for example, regarding age, what's the experience, what's the job title, and so on. Secondly, the interviews allow the researcher the flexibility to probe initial participant responses. That is, to ask why or how, which help in further elaboration on their answers. Let's say that you ask the participant a particular question, and the participants mentions an important point or an interesting point that you think that may add to the value of your research. So in this case, the researcher can ask what we call probing questions. Probing questions to ask the participant to elaborate more on this particular point or this particular idea that has been mentioned during the interview. So why this happened or how this happens, this will help in enrichment of the data in qualitative research, which also cannot be done using a quantitative survey or quantitative questionnaire in quantitative research. This will again enforce the idea of rich and deep data that can be produced using qualitative research approach, which is one of the main contrasts between quantitative and qualitative research approaches. So, as we mentioned, interviews can take place in an individual one-to-one, which is similar to the one that you saw in the figure in the previous slides, or a group setting, and we can call the interviews that are conducted in a group setting as a focus groups, where you have, or the researcher would be the moderator or the facilitator of this group interviews, and it's based on a discussion between the researcher and a group of people or a group of individuals that have been selected again purposefully, which is the main type of sampling in qualitative research, is to select the people who have experience and can give you rich data regarding your topic. Okay, so we have in qualitative research two types of interviews: structured and unstructured interviews. Structured interviews, let's say, depend on the use of interview schedule, or what we call interview guide, where you have the researcher part like guide consists of several questions related to the topic or phenomenon under investigation, and these questions that can be used in the interview guide are the researcher can formulate these questions or the interview guide based on the information from the literature, relevant literature regarding the topic under investigation. And we'll talk about that in details in the next slides. So firstly, we will talk about structured interviews. In structured interviews, the interviewer, which can be said also as the researcher, let's say, asks interviewees a series of pre-established questions. This is what we mentioned about interview guide or interview schedule, where the researcher develops a guide which can help the researcher to collect data in a systematic manner from different participants, asking them in the same word, in the same order, which help also to establish consistency of collecting data from different participants. So this is what we mean by structured interviews, where the interviewer asks interviewees a series of pre-established questions. Let's say here the interviewer could not be also the principal investigator or the primary researcher in a particular research. So the interviewer could be someone else other than the principal investigator. The questions would be asked in the same order for all respondents or all participants. This is, could be considered also as an advantage for structured interviews, where there will be consistency in collecting data between different participants. Structured interviews are rigid, as the interviewer reads from a script and deviates from it as little as possible. Since researchers take a very active role in question design, there is a possibility that they inadvertently or overtly bias data collected. So this could be one disadvantage of these structured interviews, where the questions design or the design of questions or the design of interview schedule or guide is developed by the researcher themselves. Highly standardized procedures are designed to substantially reduce the probability of the results being influenced by the interviewer's bias. For example, one of the procedures that can be helped reduce interviewer bias, for example, is to make the interviews or collecting data from these interviews by one interviewer, by one researcher, rather than collecting data or collecting data from the interviews in qualitative research by several interviewers. So this could help in reducing the interviewer bias. While it's important to know that it could be this reducing the interviewer bias, as the researcher is the main instrument in qualitative research. The interviewer bias could be unavoidable in qualitative research. It could be reduced, but it's generally unavoidable in qualitative research. And this slide, just to have an idea about the meaning of interview guide or interview schedule that the interviewer can use in doing interviews and qualitative research. This is an example of interview guide or schedule. As you can see, it consists of several questions related to the topic or phenomenon or event or occurrence under investigation. For example, what do you think? So you can use this formula in formulating the research questions or the interview guide for your qualitative research. What do you think is the most effective way of assessing child pain? Have you come across any issues that make it difficult to assess child pain? What pain relieving interventions do you find most useful and why? All of these can, if you can see this difference from quantitative research questions where you collect numerical data. Here you collect textual data, give you a rich and deep data regarding your topic. When managing pain in children, what's your overall aim? Whose responsibility is pain management? What involvement do you think parents should have in their child's pain management? What involvement do children have in their pain management? Is there anything that currently stops you managing pain as well as you would like? What would help you manage pain better? So again, these questions, it should not be like the same numbers, the same number. You may have different numbers of questions and different interview schedule or interview guide, but what you need to know that you can formulate these questions or develop the interview guide or interview schedule in qualitative research based on the literature in your area. So we finished talking about structured interviews. Now we will talk about unstructured interviews. Unstructured interviews, mainly from its name, it does not depend on interview schedule or interview guide. So it's more flexible, not as rigid as the structured interview, as the researcher does not use predefined questions. There are some names or other names, or let's say synonyms for structured, unstructured interviews in the literature. You can find them in different textbooks or different articles related to types of interviews in qualitative research. Unstructured interviews could be called as informal, conversational interview, in-depth interview, non-standardized interview, and sometimes they call it as ethnographic interview. This gives us an indication that the types of observation that's frequently used in ethnographic research is unstructured interviews or non-standardized interview. Okay, so it's rely entirely on the spontaneous generation of questions and the natural flow of an interaction. So just there's an interaction between the participants and the researcher, and these questions are generated spontaneously while doing these interviews. So it can be considered as a natural extension of participant observation because they often occur as a part of ongoing participant observation fieldwork. So we can say that these unstructured interviews is somehow connected or associated with a participant observation. So you observe, and while observing the participants, you asking them some questions, and these questions are flowing naturally and spontaneously, and they are not predefined. It's just emerge according to the context you are studying or you are observing. Okay, so could be considered as a natural extension of participant observation. It's accepted that the structure of the interview can be loosely guided by a list of questions called an aid memoir or agenda. Let's say it's just, it could be the researcher could develop prior to doing unstructured interviews something called aid memoir or aid agenda. This one, it's different from interview schedule or interview guide that has been developed to be used in structured interview. Here we are talking about something just loosely guide or the interview just some questions that may guide the researcher while doing observation or doing this interview to ask the participants some questions. This is called aid agenda or agenda, not interview schedule, okay, or guide. So it's a broad guide. This is the difference between the interview schedule and the agenda. It's a broad guide to topic issues that might be covered in the interview. So it's a broad guide, not just mentioning the topics that may be asked to participants. It's not questions, predefined questions as in the interview schedule or interview guide, rather than the actual questions to be asked for the participants. Unlike interview guides used in structured interviewing, agenda or aide memoire does not determine the order of the conversation and is subject to revision based on the responses of the interviewees. Note-taking is a traditional method for capturing interview data, but in unstructured interview, note-taking is likely to disrupt the natural flow of the conversation. Thus, when possible, it's preferable to audio record the interviews by tape or digital recorder. So even in structured interviews, The interviews are needed to be recorded either by a tape or a digital recorder, but the researchers still in the structured interviews can take some notes while doing this interview, in the structured interview I mean. While in an unstructured interview, to prevent disruption of the natural flow of the conversation between the researcher and the participants, so not talking is it's not a good option to use to be used in unstructured interviews. So it's better to use tape or digital recorder in unstructured interviews to 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 uh, to preserve the natural flow of conversation between the participant and the researcher. So regarding unstructured interviews, there are some challenges for unstructured interviews, and there are some challenges for interviews in general, and we'll talk about them in the coming slides. Regarding unstructured interviews, it requires a significant amount of time to collect the needed information, especially when the researcher first enters the field and knows little about the setting. And because each interview is highly individualized, the length of each unstructured interview session also might be longer than a structured interview. So, as we mentioned, there are no predefined questions in unstructured interview. So, there may be some variability regarding the length of the interviews between different participants, which could be considered also as a challenge and lead to longer interviews than structured interviews. Secondly, the challenge for researchers to exert the right amount and type of control over the direction and pace of the conversation. When a new topic emerges in the discussion or the conversation and unstructured interviews, it is difficult for the researcher to know whether to follow it and risk losing continuity, or to stay on the major theme and risk missing additional useful information. Okay? So to develop your skills in controlling unstructured interviews, both training and experience are important. So the researchers should be trained and have experience in controlling the pace of and the direction of unstructured interviews. Thirdly, analyzing the data gathered by unstructured interview. It could be also a challenge for the researcher. The questions asked in each unstructured interview were dependent on the context, as we mentioned, of the interview, and so can vary dramatically across multiple interviews. Different questions will generate different responses, so that a great deal of effort has to be made to analyze the data systematically to find the patterns within it. So, which is different from structured interviews, where we have a systematic or standardized interview schedule used with all participants in qualitative research. Here we don't have this interview schedule or interview guide. So this will lead to different questions to different participants, maybe generate different responses, and many responses, and there are a lot of variabilities according to based on these responses. So this needs a great deal of effort to be made by a researcher to analyze these data and to find patterns and thematically analyze them. So now we talk about challenges of interviews. Most interviews are recorded and will need transcribing before analyzing. This can be extremely time consuming, with 1 hour of interview requiring 5 to 6 hours to transcribe. So transcribing or transcript of the interview is writing what the participants say in the interview. So trying to hear the recorder or the record of the interview and start to write what the interviewee mentioned in the interview. Okay, so this is a time consuming process and could be considered as one of the challenges of the interview. There's an estimate, as you can see here in the slide, as 1 hour of interview. If the interview lasts for 1 hour, it may require about 5 to 6 hours to transcribe. This is just an estimate according to Prime in 2016. Okay. The analysis itself is also time-consuming. The process of thematic analysis, it's time-consuming process requiring transcriptions to be poured over word for word and line by line. So as you will see, and as we mentioned in, if you remember from grounded theory research, and we talked about the process of coding, the open coding, axial coding, and selective coding, and we mentioned how it could be a time-consuming process, and it's need to immersion of the researcher in the data, and it needs to the researcher to read word by word and line by line to get an valid analysis for the data that has been collected in the research. Okay, so process of transcription, process of analysis, all of these are time-consuming process in qualitative research, and it's maybe exhaustive for the researchers. Interviews also present the problem of bias. The researcher needs to take care to avoid leading questions or providing nonverbal signals that might influence the responses of participants. So the researcher needs to be neutral while doing qualitative research interviews. There's no need to provide nonverbal signals that might guide or may affect the response of the participant too, and maybe also lead to bias in the data collected. So these are some of challenges that may face the qualitative researcher while doing interviews. So to collect the quality data in qualitative interviews to ensure the validity of the data and validity of your research, there are some principles that can be followed to achieve quality interviews. So quality of an interview in qualitative research can be preserved by paying careful attention to the following 3 principles. Firstly, maintaining the flow of the interviewee's story. Secondly, maintaining a positive relationship with the interviewee, and avoiding interviewer bias. By following these principles, the interviewer can make sure that the quality of the interviews and the data collected is good in qualitative research. Firstly, maintaining the flow of the interviewee's story. So the flow of the interviewee's story can be inadvertently disrupted by the interviewer, such as by redirecting the narrative or interrupting the participants while talking in the interview. For example, the researcher could also rush to complete the interviewee's sentence, prematurely terminate a narrative. So there are many ways to disrupt the interviewee's story. So which can affect negatively or impact negatively on the quality of the data collected. Maybe sometimes the researcher fail to clarify some points or some concepts, or asking questions the interviewee does not understand, which can affect negatively, as we mentioned, in the quality of the data. That's why it's good practice before doing qualitative research and to do pilot study to test the comprehensibility of the terms and concepts that's used in the interview schedule or in the interview guide, so that the participants can understand and answer accurately to these questions or the questions of the interview guide or schedule. Secondly, maintaining a positive relationship with the interviewee. Positive relationships with the interviewee can be maintained by not offering opinions about responses, so you need to be neutral. The researcher needs to be neutral, not offering responses, not asking for options to be answered from. Also, by avoiding nonverbal indications of surprise or shock to the answers of the participants, not using also nonverbal cues such as nodding to indicate approval or a correct answer. So, as we mentioned, the researcher need to be neutral to avoid the bias in collecting the data. Also avoiding interviewer bias. The interviewer should not pose leading questions or fail to follow up or omit topics introduced by interviewees. So sometimes there are some particular topics, some particular information that's mentioned by the interviewer, by the participants or interviewee in the interview, and maybe the researcher omit these topics. This is not a good practice and impact negatively on the quality of the interviews and consequently on the quality of the data collected. So these three principles or these three points are important and can help the researcher to collect quality data and qualitative research in general. We finished talking about interviews or individual interviews or let's say one-to-one interviews. Now we will start talking about the second type of data collection methods in qualitative research, which is focus group. As you can see in the image here, focus group, it's a discussion between the researcher and a group of people. That's why it's called groups, and it focuses on a particular topic under investigation, and the researcher in this case or in this data collection method is called as the facilitator or the moderator of this focus group discussion. So, as we mentioned, focus groups, which is sometimes called as focus group interviews or sometimes focus group discussions, sometimes they call it as focus group discussions. It take place in a group setting. Focus groups are not recommended for studying sensitive topics that people will be reluctant to discuss in public. So when the topic under investigation is about a sensitive topic, let's say we are going to investigate, or the researcher is going to investigate or to explore the for example, the causes of missed care. So there's something called missed care in healthcare that, let's say, for example, a physician or a doctor does not provide all required patient care. So the doctor missed or left some of procedures undone for the patients. This is a sensitive topic and sensitive issue. If you are going, or if the researcher is going to investigate such an issue in a focus group discussion, it will be considered as sensitive by the participants, and they will not be able to engage in this discussion in focus group in an open manner. Maybe, for example, because they may think that if they are engaged in the discussion in an open manner, they will be, let's say, punished by the management or their managers. So in this case, it's recommended to do one-to-one interview or individual interview where the participants will be able to talk about this issue in an open manner, which will be reflected on the quality of the data collected and validity of information obtained from the participants. So again, when the researcher is interested in studying a sensitive topic, it's better to do individual interviews or one-to-one interviews rather than focus group interviews or focus group discussion. Continuing talking about focus groups, a key characteristic of focus group discussions or focus group interviews is the interaction between members of the group. So as we mentioned, the researcher will be the facilitator or the moderator of the discussion, while there's also an interaction between members of the group. Focus groups typically consist of 8 to 12 people. The ideal is from 4 to 8, with a moderator who focuses the discussion on relevant topics in a non-directive manner. So you can see different numbers of the focus groups or the members of the focus groups in different textbooks. Here we will consider that typical situation to be consist of from 8 to 12 people, while the ideal is from 4 to 8 members in one focus group. The moderator or the facilitator help in focusing the discussion, let's say, or facilitating the discussion between group members on the relevant topics, but it will be in a non-directive manner. So the researcher gives the freedom for the participant to talk about the issue under investigation in an open manner, but may focus the discussion if it goes outside or will be outside the scope of the topic under investigation. The moderator or facilitator facilitate the discussion and maybe redirect the discussion toward the phenomenon or topic under investigation. Okay. The smaller the group, the less information we gather, which is as you talk with more people or with more participants, you are going to collect more information. On the other hand, having more than 10 people in the group make it crowded and difficult for all members to participate and interact. So there is somehow advantages and disadvantages. So we need to have as we mentioned, the ideal number, which is from 4 to 8. So the more people, the better, or the more information. However, more people means that it will be crowded and there's no, maybe the facilitator or the moderator or the researcher maybe lose the control over the discussion. So let's say to take the ideal number, which is from 4 to 8. Multiple focus groups should be conducted in order to gather sufficient amount of data, opinion, and views on the study. So, in this way, we can solve the problem of this. As we mentioned, if the number of people in one focus group increase, that will make it crowded, and will the facilitator or the moderator may lose the control over the discussion of those people in this group. So, what can the researcher do? He or she can make multiple focus groups, consist, let's say, of the ideal number of people in each focus group, let's say from 4 to 8 people in each focus group, and conducting, let's say, maybe 7 or 8 focus groups. This will help in taking the ideal amount of participants in each focus group, reduce the crowding, and in the same time collecting more information from more participants. Okay. So focus groups have several advantages. Firstly, convenience, as you interview several people in one interview, so it's somehow more convenient for the researcher than the individual interviews. Time and expenses savings, as you have, as we mentioned, to interview several people in the same interview, so it will be saving time and saving expenses than doing multiple interviews for multiple people at different times. Because the researcher, as we mentioned, the facilitator or the moderator, takes a less active role in guiding the discussion, less bias is introduced by the researcher than in individual interviews. So, as we mentioned, the facilitator or the moderator or the researcher guide the discussion in an undirected manner. So, the researcher, there will be, or the risk of bias here in focus groups, it will be less than in individual interviews. So in this slide, you can see some conditions or some factors that the researcher needs to consider when he or she wants to choose whether to use focus group discussions or group interviews or individual interviews in his or her research. For example, let's say in the case of respondents are dispersed or not easily assembled in one location to do the focus group discussions, then in this case the researcher will it's better to do individual interviews. Let's say, for example, requirement for interview guide. Let's take requirement for interview guide. In the case of focus group discussions or group interviews, enough is known to establish a meaningful topic guide. When enough is known to establish a meaningful topic guide, it's good to use group interviews. However, in the case of individual interviews, it may be necessary to develop the interview guide by altering it after a series of initial interviews. Let's say, for example, in the case of sensitivity of subject matter or topic under investigation. If the cases or subject matter is so sensitive that respondents would be unwilling to talk openly in a group, then it's better to use individual interviews. However, if the subject matter is not so sensitive that respondents will temper responses or withhold information, then in this case it's better to use group interviews. So in this slide you can see some factors that the researcher need to consider when to choose group interviews and when to choose individual interviews. In this slide you can see examples for papers that used or qualitative research papers that use different types of data collection method that we have covered in this lecture so far. Firstly, the first one, which is interview study, which used mainly individual interviews or one-to-one interviews. Surgeons' aims and pain assessment strategies when managing pediatric post-operative pain, qualitative study. The second one, the second study, which mainly used focus group as a data collection methods in this research, which is I couldn't even talk to the patient, barriers to communicating with cancer patients as perceived by nursing students. Okay, so these papers will give an idea about how this information that we have mentioned in throughout the lecture can be applied in practice and in research. So to now we finished talking about the first two types of data collection methods in qualitative research, which were interviews and focus groups. Now we will start talking about observation. Observation, if you remember from the qualitative research approaches or methods that we have covered previously in this course, we were talking about observation many times. For example, when we talked about ethnography, when we talked about also maybe case study, we mentioned observation as one of the data collection methods that can be used in qualitative research. In this lecture, we will talk about observation in details, and we will talk about the types of observation as participant observation and non-participant observation, and many other details regarding observation as a data collection method in qualitative research. So, simply, as the name implies, observation means observing in the field. So the researcher goes to the field and start observing the participants. So simply, observation in qualitative research involves going into the field, describing and analyzing what has been seen. So, observation in qualitative research is one of the oldest and most fundamental research methods approaches. Traditionally, observation has been extensively used in the social sciences, including psychology and medical settings. When using questionnaires and interviews, sometimes a social desirability approach impacts on participants' responses, where they say what they think the researcher wants to hear rather than what they actually believe or do. This makes it hard to find out what is really happening in practice. So one of the most important point regarding the observation and indicates that the researcher may go or may seek to do observation in the research just to avoid some bias that happens in the case of, let's say, focus group interviews or individual interviews, which is called social desirability bias. Social desirability bias means that the participants may think that the researcher wants to hear rather than what they actually believe or do, or they mentioned, or they talk in the discussion, for example, in the interviews on the focus groups, they are telling the participant may tell the researcher, or their answers could be related to something that satisfy, for example, let's say their management. So, for example, if the researcher wants to do an interview with the physicians about a particular topic, or even focus group, the researcher or the participant start to answer maybe questions in a way that they think that this answer will satisfy their management. So this is called social desirability bias. However, in the case of observation, these bias can be mitigated. So observation involves collecting data using one's senses, especially looking and listening in a systematic and meaningful way, and avoiding the social desirability bias that we have mentioned, which is associated with in the interviews and focus groups. So we will continue talking about observation. as a data collection method in qualitative research. Observation, sometimes referred to as an obtrusive method or unobtrusive measure. What do we mean by unobtrusive method? Unobtrusive measures means that the data collection and analysis by the researcher to be completed without the researcher intruding into the research context, which means that the researcher does not react with the people or the participants under investigation, with the participants of the research. Okay, so as you can see, the advantage of unobtrusive method is that they do not disturb the naturally occurring processes that are subject of the research, in particular because the informants or participants are not aware of the research that's going on. Their behavior and self-descriptions are not modified by the researcher's presence or activities. And this process may have some ethical implications, and we'll talk about that in the next slides. Also, other names for unobtrusive methods or unobtrusive measure is non-reactive or indirect methods. Okay. In observation, the research setting for participant observation is the study informant's own daily environment. Okay, so the researcher observe the participants in their own daily environment rather than a predefined setting or a setting assigned by researchers. Okay, observation provides an enormous amount of data to be captured and analyzed. And one approach to helping with collection and analysis is to digitally record observations to allow for repeated viewing. So the researcher can use or can utilize some digital recorder devices. So the researcher can view the observation, which can help in data analysis later on repeatedly. Okay. So again, observation is more than just recording of data from the environment. The researcher may interact with the people. So we are talking about unobtrusive methods, but sometimes the participant observation may involve interaction with the people in their environment. So when we observe, we are active, not passive collectors of data, like a tape recorder or a video camera. Observation seeks to find out what's going on here. So, and the data collected in observational studies can be qualitative, quantitative, or can be both. Okay. So why use observation to collect data? What is the significance of using observation as a data collection method in qualitative research over interviews and focus groups? Firstly, observation provides researchers with ways to check for non-verbal expression of feelings, determine who interacts with whom. So by participant observation, the researcher can observe or can see the way of the interaction, how the people interact with each other in a particular group, grasp how participants communicate with each other, and check for how much time is spent on various activities, if it's maybe related to the topic under investigation. So all of these issues can be better found or better investigated using observation rather than interviews or focus groups. Participant observation allows the researcher to check definitions of terms that participants use in interviews, observe events that informants may be unable or unwilling to share. Thirdly, observation helps researchers observe situations informants have described in interviews, okay, thereby making them aware of distortions or inaccuracies in description provided by those informants. So sometimes the participants mentioned about some situations and in the interview or focus group. So observation helped to clarify or to maybe to take the clear picture of those information that has been mentioned in interviews or focus groups without distortions or without inaccuracies. Okay, so it helped the researcher to capture the clear picture of the events or situations or activity and so on. Also, other advantages for using observation and collecting data in qualitative research. Uh, uh, Using observation makes it possible for the researcher to collect different types of data. So, as we mentioned, the researcher can collect both quantitative and qualitative data through performing surveys or interviews with the participants. Also, being on site over a period of time in a particular setting familiarizes the researcher to the community, thereby facilitating involvement in sensitive activities to which he or she generally would not be invited. It helps also the researcher to develop questions that make sense in the native language or are culturally relevant in the culture under investigation. It gives the researcher a better understanding of what's happening in the culture. As we mentioned, it's help to what's going on here. Okay, it enables the researcher to collect, as we mentioned, both quantitative and qualitative data. So the researcher in observation can collect both quantitative and qualitative data through doing surveys and interviews with the participants. So now we will start talking about types of observation that are used in qualitative research. Firstly, we have a non-participant observation, and secondly, we have a participant observation. Non-participant observation, whereby the researcher is not part of the activity taking place, but simply observes. So from its name, it's called non-participant observation. So the researcher does not engage with the activities of the people who they are observed by the researcher. May be identified as observer or researcher. So observers adopt a detached role. So the researcher, he or she, does not engage in the activities that are performed by the population under study or the participants or the people under investigation. Secondly, we have participant observation. So whereby the researcher takes part in community, organization or activity. This is the main difference between participant and non-participant observation, whereby the participant observation, the researcher engages or participates, let's say, in the activities of the community or people who they are observed by him or her. So researcher attempts to learn what it's like to be a part of the community, organization, or participate in the activity. So observer participates in the activities being observed. This is, let's say, summarize the participant observation as the observer or the researcher participates in the activities being observed. You can see the two types of observation that we have talked about, which are participant observation and non-participant observation. As you can see in the figure here, in non-participant observation, the researcher simply observe, just adopt a detached rule and does not participate in the activities of the participants who's being observed. However, in participant observation, he's participating in their activities. We mentioned that we have two types of observation in qualitative research, which are participant observation and non-participant observation. The participant observation, whereby the researcher, let's say, become as like a participant and interact with the activities of the community or people under investigation. However, the non-participant observation, the researcher just sitting, watching, taking notes with no interaction with the people who that he is or she is observing. There is a disadvantage from participant observation whereby the participants may alter events or alter, maybe, let's say, their behaviors when they know that they are observed by the researcher, which may be related, as we mentioned previously, about Hawthorne effect. Okay. However, in the non-participant observation, while the researcher does not engage in the activities under investigation and he adopts a detached rule, this may not allow or permit the researcher to gain a complete understanding of the event or phenomenon. So both of them have advantages and disadvantages. Similar to any concept or term in research, there are several definitions in the literature regarding participant observation. So, for example, according to Marshall and Rosman in 1989, participant observation is the systematic description of events, behaviors, and artifacts in the social setting chosen for a study. Observations enable the researcher to describe existing situations using the five senses, providing a written photograph of the situation under study. So it's a process also of enabling researchers to learn about the activities of the people under study in the natural setting through observing and participating in those activities. And the process of learning through exposure to or involvement in the day-to-day or routine activities of participants in the research settings. This is, all of these definitions are similar to what we have mentioned, that the researcher participates in the activities of the people under investigation. So again, participant observation, the researcher assumes a role in the setting or group being studied. For example, the researcher may act as a role of firefighter. Maybe he or she enrolled in a flight training school or working in a mental hospital or passing as a patient. So this is what we mean and what differentiates from participant observation or non-participant observation. So in both types of observation, whether participant observation or non-participant observation, the researcher attempts to learn about context in which behavior takes place. What is the meaning of context? So context, we talked about context in qualitative research many times, and one of the most important features that characterize qualitative research is that it provides a contextual understanding. What do we mean by context? Context means or includes many things, including physical surroundings, maybe other people in the setting. The interactions also are important and can be considered part of the context. The interactions among different people in the setting, the social, cultural, political, or economic context can also be considered as a context. It can be called as a socio-economic context or socio-political context in which the behaviors occurs and why it occurs. So the context could be at the micro level, which includes the interaction among different people in this setting, or it could be at the macro level, which includes, let's say, culture, political and economic context. This could occur at the macro level. Regarding observation, we have two styles, or let's say three styles of observation in qualitative research. Unstructured observation, structured observation, or could be a mix of both unstructured and structured observation. Unstructured observation is the most common type of observation in qualitative research, whereby it depends on the researcher words and description, use of the thick description of a phenomenon or event under investigation. So, unstructured observation, whereby the researcher describing what occurs. Researchers usually do not have a preconceived idea about what would occur. However, in structured observation, the researcher starts with an operational definition of what you want to measure, counting only the behavior or situation that fits the definition. Okay, this is what we call structured observation. You have a predefined idea or a preconceived idea about what the researcher wants to observe. This is the difference between unstructured observation and structured observation. And in structured observation, the researcher tends to use a template to record tabulations of specific behaviors that can be measured and analyzed statistically. So in this case, what we concern more in qualitative research is the unstructured observation. And the researcher also can use a mix of structured observation and unstructured observation. Okay, but what we need to know that the part or the most common type that we depend on in qualitative research is the unstructured observation. So, regarding observation, researchers record what they see, hear, smell, and taste using field notes. So, field notes is very important component and an integral part in observation as a data collection method in qualitative research. So, what is the meaning of field notes? Field notes are written record of what is observed, what are the impressions, reactions, and hypotheses about what has happened while the researcher is observing or is in the process of observation of the participants. Maybe also taking photos of people and setting may be added to analysis, as you see in the slide here. Maybe audio taped or video taped are also used to document what researchers find in the setting under investigation. So again, field notes is an important part and component in observation and in data collection methods in qualitative research in general. So just to make the idea of field note clearer to you, here is an example of a field note that's written by the researcher during triage nurse observation. So there's details, maybe let's say about some actions, some interactions that happen in the setting under observation. So in the field notes, the researcher is recording some fine details while he's observing the participants and while he's observing the setting under investigation. So in this lecture we have covered the first part of data collection methods in qualitative research. We talked about interviews, one-to-one interviews, group interviews, or what can be called as focus group discussion. We talked about advantages and disadvantages of each of these. We started talking about observation as an important data collection technique or method in qualitative research. We talked about participant observation, non-participant observation, and the differences between them. Hope this lecture was interesting. In the next lecture, we will cover the second part of data collection method and qualitative research. We will talk in details about observation, what is the meaning of covert observation and overt observation, and many other details regarding observation. Thank you.